to A Therapist, a Buddhist, and You, a collective solution to health and wellness. My name is Luke DeBoy, and I am here with, there's only one co-host in this show, and this show would not happen if it wasn't for the co-host, my friend Zaw Maw. Welcome, Zaw.
Hey, hello everyone. Good to be here again. This is Zaw.
And what episode topic we have today. I think there is a useful equation for recovery. Yes, for all forms of recovery, but most certainly substance abuse and recovery from addiction. I'm not going to give him a cliffhanger, but what do you think about having an equation, a formula for recovery?
That sounds quite precise and solid. So I'm curious. I don't think I've ever heard of it like that. So yeah,
well,
tell me.
I don't know if I
us.
made it up. But this certainly comes to my mind when we think of, I believe there's no one way to get sober. There's more than one way to find success, find recovery. So this equation or this formula is broad and vast enough to cover success, or we'll talk about the specifics of each part of this equation and what we think about it. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good. I like that concept of equation.
We do not have a drum roll, but let's not make them wait any longer. Let's give them that equation for substance abuse recovery, and we can certainly relate it to other forms of recovery. Recovery equals insight plus treatment plus action. A pretty basic formula of addition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I like to break things down. Shall we get into it?
Yeah. Do we start with recovery?
Well, that's the sum.
Uh-huh.
That's the solution for this whole thing. So let's start with insight.
All right.
Sometimes we might start with insight last in terms of the equation, but we can start with it first. But before we do that, I think we should discuss recovery and what it is and what it means. Recovery can refer to the ongoing process of maintaining recovery. That's one way to look at sobriety, the ongoing solution for it. Another way of looking at recovery is the process of becoming well again after, outside of addiction, it can be looked at as the process of becoming well again after an injury or illness. That can be a medical term for recovery. Mm. And in a general way, a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness. Mm. So that's certainly outside of addiction in terms of what is success, in terms of substance use and treatment facilities. Sometimes people see recovery as no longer using the substance for X amount of time or maintain that abstinence for the rest of their life. That can certainly be one way to look at it. But these definitions give a different perspective on it, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very useful, broad concept. But I think of it from the point of view of wellness. Recovery really sets the condition for one to be of maximum ability or capacity. Mm-hmm. Because I sometimes even equate recovery with some kind of a spiritual path too, especially if you are recovery through the means of spirituality. It is not, let me get recovered to this state, but it's more like a journey ongoing that takes you places that you've never discovered before, you know?
Yeah, an ongoing process of change in the right direction with spiritual, physical, mental, emotional. We often throw those words around in a holistic way of health and wellness, part of our subtitle. Mm-hmm. My first formula was put as much into my recovery as I did my addiction. That was my first formula for success. I spent a lot of time using, thinking, acting on getting my substances, finding a way to continue my lifestyle, but maintain my drinking and other substances. And then for recovery, I spent a lot of time using. So part of my early formula was, can I spend time on whatever recovery is to no longer use?
Yeah, on the concept of equation, they were directly proportional the more effort you put into the solution, the stronger the recovery is?
I think I was pretty fortunate that I was, I don't know why this word came to my mind, but inundated with recovery stuff, partially by choice, by choice, but also a big part of the conditions that were set around me. I had drug charges that said mandated some things recovery oriented. I had family support and boundaries that set a boundary of seek this treatment, seek this recovery activity, or we don't support other aspects of what you may want to do. So I certainly had boundaries in place of legal system, family members to go, why don't you really give this a try? And we'll remove some of those barriers from you putting as much effort, like as in taking time off from school. I got sober when I was 20 years old. So yeah, my early recovery involved daily action when it comes to the recovery activities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is part of the equation according to what you have said, action. Yeah, but we're going to start with insight. I want to hear the unpacking. If you want to, I do have some initial reaction to that word, but I want to hear from you first.
Okay, good. So recovery equals insight plus treatment plus action. Insight. We can look at that as an aha moment. We can look at insight in the context of addiction recovery in terms of developing a deeper understanding of oneself, of one's addiction, of one's underlying issues that contribute to addictive behavior. All of these can be forms of, I like to call it a light bulb moment, or this,
You know, you've probably heard of, in terms of Buddhist tradition, there's this concept of insight meditation, which is a translation of vipassana, Vipassana, which is a Pali word, which can be translated as V means like deep or clear in the depth, into the depth, and pasana or patana means seeing. So the deep seeing, which also sometimes is translated as seeing things as they are. So insight, it's just a translation, but I like that a lot, because if we think about the Eightfold Path too, it begins with right view, right understanding. So when I have a right view of what's going on, it not really like what's right and what's wrong, but it's more about seeing reality as it is. So I like that fact, because that's been my experience too when I first got sober through 12-step. When I had an understanding of what I suffer from, it still had power over me, but less. And I was more attracted to, this is what I'm suffering from. And here's a group of people who are recovering from that. And I'm just kind of follow what they're doing, you know?
And what was that reality? What was that realization where you realize, oh my goodness, I am suffering from this? Yes, from drinking and or drugging, but what else do you mean by the reality you were suffering from? As a Buddhist, I imagine you can go a couple different ways with that.
Yeah, for me, I was specifically thinking of alcoholism, because we've discussed about this too, that for me, it was like a moral failure, that why can I not stop? But the insight that I gained from the fellowship was, this is a disease, that I suffer from this disease in a way of, once I start, I cannot stop, you know? Mm-hmm. That was like an insight. That has been true for me, but I didn't see it that way. That, actually, I just changed my mind. It's not that once I start, I could not stop. I was making the decision to keep drinking. But looking back, it was like, no, I had a different idea before starting the first drink. But after the first drink, it's all gone. I'm fully in. So that's the main insight that I was referring to, the understanding.
Yeah, I think of just you saying that sparked a lot of insight in my early recovery. One of them was, for me, I am an alcoholic. I remember being in inpatient treatment and realizing that I had issues, but it wasn't that bad, that I didn't do that. I could compare out. And I remember that first kind of aha moment where I truly realized, and in my innermost self, that I was my definition of an alcoholic, meaning I had a bigger problem with alcohol than I originally realized. It also meant to me, part of that insight, that aha, was I am powerless over alcohol in a way that was a lot more unmanageable than I wanted it to be. That was a form of insight for me. It was a realization in my first few days of inpatient treatment I did not have. Part of my insight, my aha was, oh, I'm not the only one that thinks, feels, and reacts this way to alcohol.
And it opens doors too, although it's not specifically part of that formula that you mentioned, but insight is only possible through community in a way. But I mean, in terms of meditation, insight arises as you're meditating on your own. But when it comes to a disease or this kind of disease in particular that tells you don't have it, that's what I've heard in the 12-step fellowship. It's one of the only or one of the few diseases where you have it and it tells you don't have it. So insight is only possible, that saying that I've heard of too, that you cannot read the label of the jar while you're in the jar, You have to look at it from the outside, and that insight is only available for me in my experience when I connected with the community of people who is in a further place in recovery. For me, it was a reflection of, oh wow, I gained that insight through connecting with other people in recovery.
There's an analogy or there's a perspective. A goldfish doesn't know they're in water.
Oh yeah.
How would you know if you're in it sometimes? Part of my realization of insight through my substance abuse recovery was alcohol and my other substances that I use was just a symptom, wasn't the ultimate problem. I took alcohol, which I used as a solution to my life, and removed it. And I began to realize, oh, yes, alcohol is a problem, and it's part of the powerlessness in my life. Alcohol was just a cover-up for a lot of other things going on, and that was an aha moment for me.
That somehow resonates with me in terms of the Buddhist path too, because that's the same word, insight, being used. And then the first factor of the Eightfold Path is right view or right understanding, which specifically is pointing towards the Four Noble Truths. Which is the reality as it is, that it's a cause and effect world. So seeing things as they are, it's in a way the way you're describing about knowing the deeper meaning of what you suffer from, which is in a way of uncovering that it's just a superficial understanding that I had, that I thought drinking was a problem. But actually when you uncover it, have an insight, you see that, oh, that's just a superficial top level stuff, but it's cool, it goes deeper.
And part of that going deeper in some recovery communities, they call these aha moments, this insight, a spiritual experience. That they relate this in a spiritual way, a deeper realization that can lead to recovery or change.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about the plus sign here. So when you combine insight with treatment.
Wouldn't it be nice if I had insight proactively when it comes to a lot of things in my life? I would sure love to know if I had the insight, if I changed this job, that I would be successful or have more money, or if I had this conversation, or if I took this business deal, or that I wish I had the forward thinking and the insight ahead of time. But it doesn't always work that way, does it?
Yeah, sounds like a premonition.
So insight is great if we have it and we have that aha, that realization. Doesn't always work that way. There's another saying that you can't think your way into good living. You've got to live your way into good thinking. That sometimes it takes an action to create a reaction. Yes, this involves change and action, which is part of the equation. But one way to get that insight and to get that action is through treatment.
So treatment, a program of action kind of thing, a series or a program?
Well, treatment's an interesting thing. So there's passive treatment and active treatment. In a medical way, you can be worked on or treated on. I don't know if I'm using the correct language there, but someone can treat you for an illness. Someone can treat you for a medical condition, but that alone might not suffice or be good enough. So when we think of treatment, many of us struggle to find. There's a lot of different forms of treatment, especially for recovery. We can think of inpatient or residential treatment. therapy, medical assisted treatment. There's all these different forms of treatment that can help with recovery. Okay, that's great and all, especially when substance use is of epidemic proportion. But what are your thoughts on this being a critical part for the success and the equation being right with recovery? Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zaw Maw's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zaw's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zaw's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zaw's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zaw Maw and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zaw Maw guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts is that, a treatment can be objective in a way, but recovery is quite personal in a way. So I can imagine treatment thriving on its own without any other aid from that person's own understanding. So because when I hear the word treatment, it has that idea of you need to identify what you're treating first. Otherwise, you're just shooting arrows into the dark, don't know where it's going. But to come up with a treatment, you need to identify what is it that is need to be treated. A broken bone, injury, whatever. Only then a treatment makes sense. But then, so yeah, that's my reaction to that. So like it connects back with that insight, right? So if somebody has accepted through the help of other people that he needs treatment, but then if there is no insight, he might just be doing that for the sake of the treatment without much of a substance, without any, no pun intended, but without substance in the treatment, no meaningful essence.
One of my favorite examples I frequently give for treatment is a broken bone. Part of the treatment is identifying the problem, diagnosing it, a broken bone. That way we know how to best treat it. What do? They might splint it. They might reset the bone, put it back in place. That's part of the treatment. Might be wait for swelling to go down, anti-inflammatories, immobilize it to set up the conditions for the osteoblasts and the osteoclasts, which are the things that happen in the bone that work together and begins to really bind the break in a mobilized way for it to heal. That's setting up the conditions in a passive way for the treatment. A cast will help increase the chances of keeping it immobilized for the bone to do what it needs to do to strengthen itself and mend itself. So there's a passive form of that. But if you keep it immobilized and not move it, what happens? Muscle begins to shrink and atrophy. So after the passive treatment, well, you need some action, don't you? Mm-hmm. Some people may choose to not do so, but what increases the best chances for a healthy bone and muscles around it? Physical therapy. Mm-hmm. Range of motion. Could be massage tissue of the scar tissue to break it up. There's strengthening of the bicep and the tricep and the surrounding muscles, including the muscles around the bone. That's an active form of treatment in addition to passive. Mm-hmm. Therapy, I really try to make therapy not just talk at you therapy. I can give people perspective and insight all day, which is good. And insight's important. It can lead to an aha moment and can lead to different perspective change. But insight alone does not equal change. Insight is good. I mean, there's thousands, I don't know, probably more than thousands self-help books out there. People gain insight from their challenges, their injuries, their illnesses, their wounds all the time, and have an awareness of, oh, I might be partially in this part of my life and injury and illness and trauma because of something that happened before, and that's insight. But now where's the treatment with that? How do we begin to heal that process? How do we begin to become better?
So yeah, as you were talking, it makes me think of Eightfold Path again, because if I think about the first two factors of the Eightfold Path, because since you were talking about like insight alone does not do much, because in the category of the discernment, pinya or wisdom category of the Eightfold Path, there are two components: right view and right resolve, which is a translation, or some people translate it as right intention. So if I have an insight into the nature of things, that there is suffering, that's the right view. I see it. But then, is that it? I don't do anything about it. But that's when the second factor comes, like right resolve. So I see it, and here's my determination to get to the end of suffering. So it makes me kind of think about that as parallel, that, okay, now I have an understanding of what I suffer from, but do I just passively watch it? Or when I think about the treatment, it sounds medical, which also sounds very structured, that when there is a treatment, there is a plan, and there's an end goal, that by the end of this treatment plan, we're going to get there. So that fills a picture.
Part of recovery is discovery, right view, insight. But following that with an active change is a big piece of this whole equation. People go to treatment facilities all the time and never change something that can help them get sober. People go, man, I can teach the classes in inpatient and outpatient, but somehow they keep relapsing. So they may have a different perspective and an insight, but they're not doing a huge portion of this whole thing. Whether it's taking responsibility for change or doing a different action plan is hugely important. Treatment and recovery are two distinct but interconnected concepts. Treatment is a part of recovery, but it's not everything.
This is an important topic for me to listen to and also participate, because, insight arises as we're talking, because we don't,
One of the big things I've seen in working in the field of addiction services for many years is that people, when it comes to their recovery process and their treatment, they feel that, yeah, it's important, but they're not getting what they quote unquote want or need in the treatment process. And what I mean by that is many people struggle to find treatment that addresses every aspect of their lives and how addiction affects every aspect of their life. Meaning, group therapy is powerful, and it's one of my favorite things that I do as a therapist. And we can only cover so much in a group setting. I love what we offer at the Recovery Collective, that we offer individual therapy that affects the psychological, the emotional, and certainly the behavioral. We have Zaw that does Theravada Buddhist coaching and mindfulness coaching, Theravada, which covers a form of spiritual and applying these principles and having that insight with the self. How else would you explain what you do when it comes to the recovery process for people?
Yeah, I like the word that you use that capture it all: discovery or rediscovery or discovering something new, whatever it may be. Because as I was hearing that equation too, recovery equal insight plus treatment plus action, So it might be the other way too. I like think of it as like equation, as in something arises that is a product. So by combining those three things together, recovery as a byproduct of those together, So which I think is what I was trying to say about opening something new. So what I help people is through that too, that, here are the tools, here are the actions that we can take, but look out or wait for what's going to come out. Like how does it arise? Because, we can focus too much on the goal, but then there's that concept of process, right? So a process cannot be forced. Yeah. It's a process. That's why it is a process that I gotta do the part, and then it happens on its own, and then it arises naturally, which is more sustainable. And, to connect that with, I don't know if this is a controversial process too, because I'm very passionate about spirituality in a way. And especially in the mindfulness and meditation field, or secular Buddhism or secular spirituality, there is this attraction towards demystifying mindfulness or demystifying meditation. And I have some feelings towards that what's wrong with mystery? Mystery is awesome, that I'm curious that what's going to happen. So there's no need to demystify. Mystery, life is mysterious. And I prefer it that way because it creates that motivation and the curiosity for recovery, that recovery should be mysterious in a way of like, oh, I'm curious what's going to come out by the end of this challenge in my life. It's a mystery, but in a very motivating way.
And I think when you take a holistic approach, that can be a part of the equation, and not feeling that it's, in a world that has so many intense specializations, many people feel that they're receiving adequate care because they're focusing on one symptom, or they're focusing on a reaction to a negative consequence, that it can be so hard to feel that they're getting the care that they want or need. And then in a holistic sense, that there's a place for mystery. I think some of the things that you do augment really the classical Chinese medicine with acupuncture and the mystery with the body. What is the body actually telling us? You with the insight meditation and using some of the senses in the body to, I can't articulate this as well as you can, but be one with the breath and how it goes into the body, and feeling the somatic feelings that come with meditation and breathing, and Jonathan with the energy in the blood, and using acupuncture to help with what seems so mysterious. It's just wild.
Yeah. It's also kind of wild where this conversation is going because, you use that term too for insight, aha moment. So like when we're talking about mystery too, that I guess the word awesome is used so much that it's kind of underrated, but like awe, it's such a beautiful concept that if I have an aha moment, like if I think life is mysterious, I end up with an awe that, wow, like it can be in this moment that, wait, I am here with an awe, like especially if you are somewhere outside in a dark night and you look up and you're just struck by awe that, wow, this is where I am is mysterious, in a very enlightening way that, wow, we're here.
Yeah. And a lot of treatment fails to incorporate mind, body, and spirit to the healing process. And we're talking about, maybe we should add that to the equation. Insight, treatment, action, and all parts of self and spirituality. We're very big on the spiritual piece of health and wellness. I mean, this is our podcast. Therapists of Buddhists and you, a collective solution to health and wellness. And that's been a piece that are almost in every episode we talk about. Somehow this spirituality piece, and just about every episode is one of the common denominators for this whole thing.
Yeah.
Just an aha moment I've had through this whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I do a weekly reading with a good friend of mine in recovery, and we mostly talk about meditation and then some spirituality stuff. And one of the readings that we're doing this morning, actually, this is a reading that we did last week, and we did it again because it was just so cool. It's talking about like touch, but touch as in like not like a physical touch. So like when we are talking, you and I talking, there's touch happening in terms of like meeting. We cannot see it. Your thoughts are meeting my thoughts. And when there is a communication, it's some kind of unseen thing, but it's also something that arises as a spirituality, which I think is what's happening in this podcast, and then just collective solution in general. That's something that arises when things meet, not visibly meeting. Even like, people listening right now, they're meeting us, there's a meeting, touching, and something arises when things meet.
Yeah, I'm certainly in awe. we've made this podcast and recording and editing and putting it out to the people that are listening. This is an action that's now been, since we've done it for over 90 days, we've got a behavior here that we've done. That makes me in awe of the connectedness, part of the community, part of the collective solution to health and wellness. And there is a connectedness that I'm excited as we continue to do this podcast, as it evolves to more connection with our listeners. That's exciting to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I also like the fact that the term Buddhist is already in the title. So I don't really hold myself when I have a Buddhist thought based on what you're saying, recovery related, addiction related, therapy related. So it's exciting for me too, because I get to kind of participate and throw out some things that I'm passionate about, and still kind of make sense of it in a way too, even if it doesn't make sense. So I'm really liking this mutual exchange,
Yeah, if it doesn't make sense from my perspective, it'll make sense when you give your perspective. Maybe that's why some of these listeners keep coming back from different states and countries. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an honor and a pleasure to do this.
Yeah, part of treatment is to gain different perspective. Part of treatment for addiction recovery is to gain coping skills. Part of treatment is to have a better understanding of underlying causes and conditions, to see that it's not just about putting down a drink or drug for a lot of people after they continue the treatment process. We talked about in previous episodes the physiological changes that happen as a direct result of substance use and poisoning the brain and body and the organs, that it is a brain disease. Check out those early episodes. So treatment continuously can be a very important part for the success of continuous recovery, not just maintaining abstinence, but further discovery and recovery and wellness and serenity. That the more you continue treatment, your success rate goes up through the roof the longer you do it, past those 6 months, which is often why you see the model of detox, residential inpatient setting, a continuing care through the intensive outpatient, and then through a continuing care once a week or a relapse prevention group. And that can last anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half. And we've talked about how the healing of the brain can take 6 months to 2 years to 24 months. So continuing the treatment and having opportunities for insight, having opportunities for change and coping skills and action is so vitally important. This is a pandemic, an epidemic, because people shortchange the length of their treatment. If you got a ACL surgery, after the swelling goes down, people don't think about not doing the physical therapy and the range of motion and the strengthening of the quadricep muscles and the hamstrings, and then working on the balance and the proprioception and these Purkinje fibers that are in your bones and your muscles and your ligaments to get better balance. We continue to do that treatment months after the initial treatment of surgery for a reason. And then what do? You do a follow-up months later to make sure it's continuing to heal.
Yeah.
So that form of continuing treatment is really important.
And yeah, to circle it all together, for me, what has been the most helpful, both for my spiritual path and also recovery, is a sense of community. I think that's also what you're hinting at about the maintenance or the continuation of the treatment. Because if I am just sober by myself, like selfishly, it's not very sustainable, or it'll become boring, But if there is a community of people who are thriving and recovering, it's very motivating. I don't know which category it belongs to, but it's probably part of action plan and also treatment plan as well, or even insight. That sense of community is so important for recovery.
Yeah, and if you're not in community, you can isolate. I often tell people the best form of treatment for depression is action, meaning stop isolating. And it can be unbelievably be hard, because a symptom of depression is isolation, and and lack of energy and just wanting to hole up, and that can just compound on itself. The hardest thing to do is one of the best things you can do, which is often a healthy treatment. Now, I know this isn't all or nothing, but action is a wonderful treatment plan for depression.
Mm-hmm.
And community can help us get outside our heads. Community can help the energy connection. Community can help release endorphins. Community can be a power greater than ourselves. So yeah, I think that we're seeing that this third piece to this equation, we've talked about this whole episode, action. We've talked about it with insight. We've talked about it with treatment. So now let's just highlight it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. When you think about action for recovery, what comes to your consciousness?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like words related, but action for me immediately makes me think of being active, because being in depression also means not being active, Mm-hmm. So being active is taking action, getting involved, being proactive, doing things. And I also hear this thing about, mood follows actions, that just do it anyway, and then the feeling will follow. Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough from my personal experience about community that it's crazy when the connection happens. I would be having a difficult day, and then I would decide to make a phone call, which is an action that I don't want to take, and I call anyway. But within a couple of minutes, it's crazy. If I were to have a bird's eye view of myself from the outside, how I changes within that 3 minutes is unbelievable. When you connect, it's like almost like a cheat sheet. That's why people that I help with in the community, I always talk about reach out, check in, call anyway, even if you don't feel like talking, or even if you don't know what you're going to talk about. Some kind of magical thing happens within the conversation. Can be sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes it will be just 2 minutes. But when you get your thoughts outside of your head to connect with somebody, that elevation, or you elevate to a different level, is really crazy.
I don't think I've given this example on the podcast before, but one of my early stages of all of these things together for my recovery, I was in a support group where they say, we will know serenity and we will know peace. And I was probably in my first 3-6 months of abstinence and recovery and sobriety. And I heard that being read out loud, and they said, serenity. And I said, what is serenity? And I said, I'm not going to look it up. I'm not going to look at my phone. I'll see if I have it. I'll see if this thing's working. So a couple of days go by, and I'm in an intensive outpatient program. I'm seeing a therapist, and I'm in a support group. And a couple of days go by, and I'm listening to this guy in the meeting, and he's sharing that his mother just passed. And mother or father, I don't remember which one. And I could see heartache, pain. And he was talking about his addict brother and his alcoholic sister and the mess and chaos that's going on in their lives. And I'm listening to him talk for a handful of minutes. And I'm beginning to realize, even though he's got this grief, this hurt, this shock, this chaos that he has in his life, I'm looking in his eyes and I'm listening to him talk. And even though he has this pain and this form of suffering, he still has peace. And I realize in my first time in sobriety, and he goes, oh, that is serenity. And then it's like, it's almost like if a camera came right at me and hit me in the chest. And I go, oh, I have some peace of mind. I have some calmness of mind. I have some serenity. And I go, zoop. And I look up and I go, all right, got it, higher power, got it, God. And I said, I'll see if I get this ego thing. But what was going on in my life? I was in treatment. I had an aha moment. I had an insightful moment for the first time in my recovery, in my early sobriety. I realized, guess what? This person is having some external chaos and stress and internal pain, but it wasn't taking away his peace of mind, calmness of mind, and serenity. And to me, that's one of the best things that I've gotten out of my recovery, is because of the insight that I've gotten through action, through treatment, through support, through change, through evolving, through spirituality. through connecting with you in this podcast and meditation and understanding Buddhist principles, among other things, that I can still have internal peace and serenity, even though I might have some external chaos, even if I have some internal suffering. That's almost speechless of what a cool thing that recovery has given me. Peace and serenity and calmness of mind, even in a life full of chaos and stress, because of this equation.
Definitely. Yeah, that's very well, beautifully said. I don't have much to add to it other than, resonating with you about serenity. That is beautiful. That it's also something that you cannot fake. That's what we're trying to talk about earlier too, something that arises naturally. So if my life is going crazy, I cannot fake my serenity. I can fakely smile, but people know, so it's like an internal work. I have to really embrace it, take it all in, and then serenity arises. It's not like, oh yeah, let me pretend that this is not happening. I'm serene. No, it's more like, no, let's just take it all in. And then in 12-step fellowship, I hear this a lot, the term trust, which I equate, the term faith sounds a little religious, so I prefer trust. People talk about trust God, and that's it right there, right? Like when somebody's talking about all these difficulty in their life, and when he's coming from a place of calm place to verbalize all that, that person is trusting, that he trusts that this will pass. He trusts that all will be well. And how powerful that is. I also equate that with refuge from a Buddhist concept. That refuge, there's always a refuge within me, a reliable internal source that I can always go back to, which is all about trust. I trust. And not to go too far tangent too, but sometimes I think about if we think about our existence here right now, whoever you are, there is an ancestral history behind your existence, which is very powerful because sometimes, in the 12-step, people talk about higher power, God and stuff. But for me, I don't need to go too far. I just have to, if I think about genes within me, all my ancestors, many, 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 many of them somehow survive. That's in me. So those people in the past didn't survive, survival of the fittest, because life is, difficult to survive, but somehow they made it. Not for me to just look on my swipe on my phone, they made it all through. So I might as well make the best out of it. And then that force is already within me, ancestral, within me. So it makes me think of that as well as you're talking about serenity and the refuge, that I just have to go to that source, that I'm already here. I've already been made to be here.
What a safe, healing place that is, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So how's that for an equation? Recovery equals insight plus treatment plus action.
It covers it all.
It does. It's vast enough, but it allows us to get down into the individual specific. And this can look different for a lot of people in terms of what treatment looks like, what action looks like, what realization, perspective, and insight looks and feels like. But all of these are hugely important for recovery. One thing I want to do on the Recovery Collective homepage, we mention kind of how we look at recovery, because we're clearly talking about, yes, addiction and substance abuse recovery, but this can be an equation for all forms of recovery. And I'll read a little bit of what our homepage says about it. The truth about recovery is that it is a process. Just like life itself, it is forever changing and moving forward. Healing never has to stop. There is always more we can recover and grow from, becoming more whole along the way. Recovery is a form of discovery. Recovering parts of ourselves that has been cut off means they are finally revealed to us, and we discover something new about ourselves. We discover that we are greater than we were before, more aware of our inner strength and resources. We become empowered. What do you think about that?
That's empowering.
It's a good mission, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do it holistically with setting up the conditions, a big piece to it.
Yeah, let's keep it going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys all for another deep dive into whatever Zaw and I talk about. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe, comment, review, follow, or like. If you think others would benefit from the podcast episode, share with others. And as collectively, we can find solutions to all things health and wellness. My name is DeBoy.
Here's Zaw. Thanks for listening.